Good evening and welcome to Law Talk, the show that brings the Constitution, the law, and the events of today to you each month. Well, I'm glad you're all back tonight, and tonight we're very fortunate because we have a return of Mr. Ollie Shaker. How you doing, Ollie?
Jim, I'm very happy to be here. Very happy. Glad you brought me back. Very happy to be here.
I understand that you got settled over in Los Gatos, the Caliphate, Los Gatos.
Yes, the Caliphate's growing very fast. We're very happy with the hotspot. We're settled into Los Gatos, and like I told you before, we're still part-time. I'm still making my clocks.
I understand those clocks are very successful. Don't you have a clock store in downtown?
The clocks are doing great. They're doing great. And, you know, it's never too early to think about Christmas.
Well, I got to tell you, it's a beautiful color. The only thing you left out, Ollie, is some green.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's never too early to think about Christmas. But now that's kind of a part-time gig because now I got a job funded by the U.S. government. The IRS gave a $5 billion grant to the Caliphate, and they hired navigators. So I'm now an IRS navigator.
Well, I understand that that's an important position. Aren't you guiding those Syrians that are coming to Los Gatos?
No. This is for the infidels who don't understand how things are.
Oh, the infidels.
Because they're like people who are backwards, silly. You know, they believe in this old constitutional, silly stuff, you know. And we're here to explain stuff to them because they just don't get it.
Well, I got to tell you, what do you explain to all those that don't understand?
Well, we have some new IRS regulations that are very complicated. It's called IRS-IS. And what it is, it's the new jizya tax on the infidels. And so what I do is I go to door and explain how things are and to people who don't get it.
Oh, and how do you explain this, Allie?
Well, first off, we started in a very simple fashion because some of these people don't understand how things work now.
Well, I got a question. Is this involving gun violence?
Well, that's something it kind of fishtails into, but basically we have a little questionnaire we give people, and this is something to kind of inform them, to help them understand the IRS tax form.
Oh, you're talking about the IRS-IS tax form?
You know, IRS-IS, yes.
IS, okay. So let's see. It asks me.
It asks you, do you believe in Allah?
No, I don't.
Do you believe in Sharia law?
No, I don't.
Are you happy in the Caliphate?
The Caliphate's not in my game plan.
Well, okay. You're in the Caliphate now, but the thing is, if you answered no to any of those questions, you go to the next question. So read the next questions.
Do you ascribe to Sharia law?
Okay, if you answered no, go on to your next questions.
If you answer no to 2, 3, and 4, have you paid your 1/2 of your gross annual income to jizya tax?
Yeah. Have you paid half of your gross for the jizya
No,
tax?
I don't.
Okay, and then you go on to the next question.
Do you own any guns?
Yeah, and then one more question.
If so, where are your guns hidden?
So those are the kinds we try to navigate people and explain to things how things are that they have to pay half of their gross now to the Caliphate.
Okay, so how's that going, Allie? Are you getting a lot of donations to the Caliphate?
Well, the way we say is like, if people don't understand, we just tell them, look, Christmas is coming. So then they usually pay up, you know. So it's not, I just explain how things are and they usually pay up.
Well, I got a question. Who goes to door to door? Is that you
That's
or some of your
the navigator.
Some of your friends?
The
navigators.
We're the navigators. We go and explain how things are now. Yeah.
Oh, I understand that. So
because some people are confused. They don't get it.
When you go to door, do you ask them these questions if they have guns?
Well, we need to know that because we found that people who have guns don't like to pay the jizya so much.
Oh, I wonder why.
Yeah, so they don't tend to cooperate as much.
Oh, I understand. So what are you trying to tell us that we shouldn't have guns?
Oh, the Second Amendment is the worst thing that ever happened. Back in Iran, I mean Syria, you know, the citizens don't have guns. It's ridiculous. Why should citizens have guns? That's ridiculous. You know,
but do you have a gun?
Well, the Quds Force, of course. I mean, the government always has guns, but it's ridiculous for citizens to have guns. This is ridiculous.
Well, I have a question. If the government has guns and the citizens don't, how do the people as citizens of a country defend themselves against the tyranny of government?
Well, I'll say the citizens have guns. It's a lot easier for the government to explain things to them.
I mean, if the citizens don't have guns?
Yeah, if they don't have guns, it's a lot easier. They tend to get it more.
So are you talking about the argument that you've been given when you came into the country that there are too many guns in America?
Well, there was the Democratic strategist said that because of Newtown and Sandy Hook, there was shootings, random shootings, because there's too many guns around. And there's crazy white people just going around shooting people indiscriminately. And if you got rid of the guns, no one would be harmed anymore.
Well, I understand, but you know, Allie, that I've done a little background on the gun violence compared to the rest of the world. And the United States is not even #1, even though they have the the highest per capita per 100,000 people, the highest amount of guns, the most amount of guns. But in fact, in reality, Honduras is the most violent country in the world.
Oh, we looked at that research. That means the Hondurans are much better shots than Americans.
And El Salvador is number 2.
Much better shots.
And what about Jamaica?
Obviously, much better shots. Americans have guns, but they're lousy shots.
But what about Venezuela?
Same thing.
What about Guatemala?
Same thing. They're much better shots. So,
okay, well, I understand, Allie, that I don't agree with you that much. So I think you're going to have to maybe pay one of your, adjusters or one of your people are going to have to pay a little attention.
well, just look what at San Bernardino. You had workplace violence in San Bernardino, right? You had somebody made so they kept fun of someone's beard, and just because everybody had guns, that turned into a shootout at a Christmas party, right?
Well,
if nobody had any guns, nothing. This never would have happened.
Yeah, I got to tell you something, Allie. That number 7 keeps popping up.
What's that?
Well, when you want to deliver your greeting card.
Well, the thing is that sometimes people just don't get it, and they need a little convincing.
And
So,
how do you convince them, Allie?
well, it's very simple. We just explain how things are.
Oh, and how do you explain that, Allie?
Well, we just explain it that you got a nice little house here, you got a nice little family,
And so what does that mean when you bring them the red greeting card, Allie?
The red greeting card is just our way of saying it's like time to pay your jizwa.
Time to pay your jizwa.
Yeah.
Oh, that's part of the IRS code. What number is that, Allie?
It's the IRS-IS form, and people are very confused about it because they've never heard of this 50%
Allie, I'm
growth.
going to have to interrupt you. I can't take any more of this tonight. I think you're a little off base tonight. I think last time was much more enjoyable.
Well, now that I've got a government job, I have to go with what the government's telling me to do.
Well, I'm going to have to take this away from you, Allie.
Okay, well, I'm telling you, and this is actually starting to act a little funny.
I think, well, you better take it back to the clockmaker.
Well, we have some of the kids, they're just learning. I'm a little worried about this. I think that maybe we better...
Maybe you ought to put that aside.
Maybe we ought to just kind of... this is starting to act a little funny. I think it maybe be time to... so sometimes we have a little problem with those,
And what happens with those, Allie? It's a clock.
Well, sometimes like you're sleeping and your alarm goes off a little early. That can be a problem. Yeah, it comes off a little early. So
comes off a little early.
Goes out.
You mean the alarm goes off?
Yeah, it goes off a little early. Yeah,
Oh, that's not good. So I got a question, Allie. Do you realize that the U.S. is actually one of the safest places to live in the world compared to other violence in other countries?
Well, that's because the Americans export violence to other parts of the world.
So how do they export violence?
Oh, by just being fascist, imperialist, neo-colonialists. Oh, well.
Allie, that clock seemed to explode over in the corner. What was that all about?
Well, like I said, sometimes they go off a little early. It's no big deal.
They go off a little early.
It's no big deal. It's no big deal.
Are we okay, Allie?
Yeah, I think we'll be.
Don't come to my door with your clocks.
Usually,
I'm not really part of the Sharper Image crew.
They usually only go off once.
Oh, they only go off once.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see. I got a question, Allie. How dare you come to our country and then tell us how to run our country like a caliphate?
Well, because that's American values. American values have always been to, look at Carter. Even Carter wouldn't let the Iranians in 1979. He closed the border for Iranians, and he kicked out 7,000 Iranians because they didn't report in. FDR did the same things with the Italians and the Germans and the Japanese. But now American values have changed, and if we're at war with someone, we just let them in now.
But if you come to my country, aren't you supposed to assimilate, Allie?
No, that'd be discrimination. Only a bigot would want me to assimilate because your culture's no good. And the only way we can save you is by you becoming like us.
And how is that, Allie?
Well, I would say that you've got to convert and do the right thing. You have to give up your silly Second Amendment that's causing all these troubles. Forget about this First Amendment because you can't insult all. I mean, you get your head chopped off.
Well, it's freedom of speech.
No, not anymore. You can't do that.
Freedom of religion?
So First Amendment, Second Amendment, forget about those. Now you have to be enlightened. You have to be enlightened. Yeah.
Does that mean I have to pay attention to Sharia law?
Definitely. You can't be expected to run around not obeying the law. I mean,
not obeying Sharia law.
Not obeying Sharia law.
Oh, I see. So you're coming to my country telling me and telling the rest of us that if we don't obey Sharia law, then we shouldn't be able to live in our country.
Of course. What are you, some kind of bigot?
Yeah, obviously, because I don't want to live
You're
under
some
Sharia
kind
law.
of racist fascist, is what
Well,
you are.
isn't
You're
that-
basically a Hitler, is
Well,
what you
I
are.
guess
You're
I'm a
just a little
Hitler.
Nazi. You're
Yeah,
a little
I
Nazi.
never
That's all you are.
identify myself as a Nazi.
You're just a white bigot.
All right, well, Ali, let's move on to our next subject tonight. And what would that be?
Okay. Next, we're going to talk about Koskinen.
Oh, you're talking about the head of the IRS.
our buddy-
That's a good transition
our buddy-
from the caliphate and the caliphate tax to.
Okay, so Koskinen's a good old boy. He kind of came in as kind of cover up what happened with the IRS. Now, what the IRS did is they stopped the Tea Party and the Zionist and basically conservative groups from participating in 2012 elections.
Okay,
by
what you're
denying
talking
them
about
some
is
tax
this goes
exempt
back
status.
to
Yeah.
Lois Lerner
Yeah.
pleading the Fifth Amendment in front of Congress, and the fact that she was left office but still getting paid dramatically, took all her emails, all her servers, took everything,
And was deleting them for
yeah,
years.
by
and-
accident, they were all deleted. And oh, by the way, they were lost in a storage locker.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't Keynesian came in and said there are no emails.
Well, Koskinen came in and he was supposed to clean everything up and write the vote, but instead,
who does he work for?
He's the director of the IRS.
Yeah,
so
but who does he work for?
he works for Obama.
Yeah, the same administration that gave us Lois Lerner.
Yeah, well, okay, so what happened? Ended up, he said, well, there's no tapes. The IG came and looked at it and said, no, there's lots of tapes. And then a federal judge said, don't destroy any more tapes because they've been destroying evidence like crazy.
Well, I have a question. Why would he be destroying evidence when there's nothing to hide?
Oops. Anyway.
Oh, it's the oops excuse.
The dog ate my tapes.
Oh,
And
the dog ate my
So
tapes.
anyway, he ended up erasing 422 backup tapes.
Is that it?
Which just, and another 24,000 of IRS supervisor Lois Lerner's tapes got erased. So the federal judge just went crazy on this. It's like, I ordered you not to do this. And I said, well, you didn't put it in writing. We thought you were kidding. And so Koskinen, basically did spoliation of evidence, okay, obstruction of
That's
justice.
a federal offense.
And also he perjured himself in front of Congress
that's a federal crime as well.
many times. And so what's happened now is they've gone ahead and they've done a resolution
For articles?
for impeachment. And Congressman Robert Goodlatte is the head of the House Judiciary Committee. And the House Judiciary Committee now is reviewing whether this resolution for the impeachment of Koskinen should be advanced to the House floor.
Well, I have a question. The fact that they caught him lying, the fact that they found tapes that he said didn't exist, the fact that he covered for Lois Lerner, who actually it's a political espionage, so to speak, from the IRS pulpit.
Well, it's like a cover-up.
It's a cover-up. Well, Lois Lerner wasn't the cover-up. She was the one ordering the hit squad on all 502.
No, that was some rogue employees
Oh,
in
the rogue employee in
Iowa
Cincinnati,
office.
right?
Yeah, Cincinnati office.
Yeah,
Yeah,
unfortunately, those rogue employees in Cincinnati can't even pick their nose unless Lois Lerner
Well,
tells
they
them to.
also they denied that. Okay, so what happens? What happens in an impeachment? A lot of people are confused. Okay, there's a process. If you're a public figure like Koskinen's a director, or if you're the president or something like that, the House of Representatives on a majority vote can impeach. So Clinton was impeached on a majority vote, and there was one other, I can't remember the other name of a president. Two presidents in the history of the United States have been impeached. Now you're impeached by the House of Representatives, and that's kind of like an indictment. It's like if you had a felony, that'd be like going to your preliminary hearing.
Yeah, preliminary hearing.
So is it going to advance to a trial?
Right.
So people get confused because they think the impeachment is a conviction. No, an impeachment is like an indictment.
No, an impeachment is just showing of a lack of confidence, basically.
Well, it says
and that
we
you should
think
be
we
removed from office.
We think no, impeachment is showing we think we have enough probable cause to move forward to a trial. But it's like a preliminary hearing.
But then that goes to the Senate at
then
that
the
point.
Senate goes to the Senate for the trial. Okay, and the trial has to be convicted on 2/3 of the Senate.
Well, that's nearly difficult.
So, and then the president really doesn't have anything to do with it. The Supreme Court, I think the Chief Justice is like the officiator of the whole thing. But so, yeah, you're impeached by the House of Representatives, and you're either convicted or you're not in the Senate. And that's where the trial takes place. So the impeachment is saying, do we have enough probable cause here? It's just like a preliminary hearing for a felony to move forward towards trial.
And that's where under the regime of Bill Clinton, he did have the...
He got impeached.
He got impeached,
But
went
they
to the
didn't
Senate.
convict. They didn't
But
convict.
unfortunately for him, he was disbarred by Arkansas as an attorney because of moral turpitude of lying under oath.
I never had sexual relations with them.
Yeah,
but
I
anyway,
never had sexual
but
relations.
the point
One sentence.
But the point of the matter is that people say, well, wait a minute, you don't have the votes in the Senate to impeach. That's just not correct. I mean, the Republicans have the votes to impeach along
the House.
and party lines.
Right.
So the impeachment's a slam dunk. The question is it really is it a valid impeachment? And that's what they're discussing in the House. Now, I think with this many perjuries, this much obstruction of justice, this much spoliation of evidence, I think they've got a pretty good case for impeachment.
Yeah, but you realize that there's going to that would be almost, what's that, 15 Democrats would have to vote with the 52 Republicans in the Senate to get two-thirds.
That would be the convention. But I'm saying,
The House can...
But I'm just saying that's like going to a preliminary hearing. That's like being the DA and go like, oh, I'm not going to show up for preliminary hearing because I might not win a trial. That's not the job of the Congress. And when I'm talking about the House of Representatives, their job is not to say, well, will I win our trial or not? Their job is to say, are there triable issues?
If they're triable issues, then it gets moved to the Senate.
It's their duty to impeach if they're triable issues.
And then if it gets moved to the Senate, at that point, then
it is moved
to the Senate.
It is moved to the Senate.
Oh, automatically.
Then they have like a conference where they form, legal teams and things. And then the House of Representatives hands over its findings and its arguments to the Senate because they've already looked at it. So that's a lot of discoveries already taken place.
Well, that's because the majority of discovery is up front.
Right.
Before they even move to the articles of impeachment in the House, that's where these congressional committees have been going over and over again, with fine-tooth comb, basically, the testimony of him and his predecessors. By the way, there's two predecessors. Wasn't Lois Lerner. They put in...
but he only lasted 2 months.
Yeah, but he was like little Spanky in there. He didn't get
he got beaten up.
He got beaten up the first time. He resigned and said, "I can't do it."
Well, he didn't want to take the felonies, but because Kennan obviously talked to Obama, they said, "Look, you're covered. We got,
he was saying, you're going to retire anyway. You're going to have unlimited wealth for the rest of your life.
Holder's going to cover for you. You're not going to get indicted.
It's not Holder. Now it's Loretta Lynch.
Same thing.
They are.
Lynch, Holder. They're not going to.
They're interchangeable.
They're not going to do a special prosecutor against any Democrat. It's not going to happen.
So the question is, with the amount of evidence that's lodged against
I think there's plenty of evidence for an impeachment, but we have an expression in law because I used to be on prosecution side, is like, it's one thing to know, it's another to show.
Yeah.
So I mean, everybody knows he committed all these crimes, but can you show it? Can you get a conviction? That's another issue. But I think you've got plenty to go on an impeachment or indictment. But I mean, that's just a confusion. People think, well, you have to be guaranteed to win a trial before you go to trial. Look at the guy who did the Lufthansa heist, right?
Yeah.
After 30 years, they grabbed him.
Yeah.
Not guilty. NG.
Yeah,
right?
You know why? Well, first of all, the Lufthansa hike.
Lufthansa.
Lufthansa, whatever. The airport ripoff.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it was Goodfellas.
The Goodfellas. Well, anyway, we'll leave with the Goodfellas. Let's move to our third segment. What would that be, Mark?
Well, the third segment is kind of a huge thing that we're kind of touching on tonight, and that is it's getting harder and harder to get a hold of a gun, and more people are buying guns. And Obama is like against guns because he thinks guns are bad. But it's funny, gun purchases have skyrocketed under Obama, but it's getting harder and harder for people to get them. And like say up in San Francisco, there was one gun store. First they banned bullets, and that was overturned. And then there was one gun shop left that was there for 60 years. It just shut down a few weeks ago.
Yes. Because
they said, oh, you got to fingerprint and videotape your customers. Anybody walking in's got to be videotaped. You got to get their name. And you got to fill all this paperwork. And the owner said, forget it. I'm throwing in the towel. It's not worth it. So what they're doing there's a Second Amendment. You have a right to have a gun. There can be no restriction on owning a gun because it's a Second Amendment. It's like a right to religion. It's like a right to breathing. It's not something the government gives you. It's a God-given right that you have as a human being. The government has nothing to do with your right to have a gun. They can't restrict you in any way under the Constitution. But what they're doing is they're doing all these regulations to try to do an end run around the Constitution. So one of those is ATF 41P. And what that is doing is if you have a son or a daughter and you want to leave your guns to them, you would normally put that in a trust, and that would kind of automatically flow to that person as long as they didn't have a felony or were mentally deranged or there was some reason they should be excluded. Now that starts a whole new approval process and responsible parties. So now the trustee of the trust, right, who may not be in the family, may be an attorney, now he becomes an RP. He has to be fingerprinted. He has to go through background
Yes.
checks.
So what you're actually saying is that now who would ever inherit the guns would have to go through the same background check that the original purchaser, and maybe more
onerous than they ever were.
More onerous, because you're actually passing a gun to a third party that's not buying it fresh, so they don't go through the original FBI check. Yeah. Well, you know what? What's happened with the gun restrictions has been an ongoing beating drum with the Democratic Party, and especially this last regime.
Right.
Because what happened is that it's the old thing that I said earlier: when the guns are gone, the government will step in. And here's the problem. The government wants to keep taking your gun, and they used every excuse. So when we just had this event down in San Bernardino, the first thing popping out of everyone's mouth that's on, from the president down on the Democratic Party was, take the guns, take the guns, take the guns. And you know what? This is ridiculous, because they didn't even know what the heck was going on. The president even said, oh, it's workplace violence. And everyone, this is the most absurd thing. And the Second Amendment is not being enforced properly. In fact, in Chicago, the circuit in Chicago just got through saying, or the Supreme Court actually out of the circuit of Chicago said that we're not going to even review the ban on assault weapons, because Chicago's a nightmare right now. It's imploding because of gun violence. But
but the thing is, if you look at San Bernardino, those are the strictest gun control laws.
Yeah, that's one of the strictest
on
gun
the planet.
control. And
California,
they're down there buying AK.
But I'm just saying, but
AR-15s.
that is the strictest gun laws anywhere, and that didn't stop that at all. But what's interesting, there's actually there's a federal appeals court in Washington D.C. is looking at open carry there, and they're looking back at a 1328 case under King Edward's, where you were prohibited from carrying a sword for the purpose of doing mischief after curfew in London. And so right now people are saying, look, I want to open carry. I want to carry a piece. You don't know when you're going to get attacked. The cops tell you they won't be there for a half hour, which means they won't be there for 45 minutes.
Well, easily you're going to die.
No, but I mean, the cops just can't get there for 45 minutes, right? And they say, well, the earliest we get there is 15 minutes, which means I'll see you in about an hour. Most of these altercations take place in about 4 or 5 or 6 minutes. So if you're armed, you got a chance. If you're not armed, you're just a sitting duck.
Well, that's the thing. In Texas, where they allow people to be armed, the crime rate's much lower. When everyone knows you can carry a gun, the criminals think twice about picking their target.
Well, Chicago has the highest murder rates from guns,
and that has the strictest, gun laws.
And if you go to Switzerland, everybody's got to be in the army.
It's mandated.
Every guy's got to go to the army.
Same as Israel.
And everybody's got to take his rifle home and hang it in his living room, right? There's no crime.
There's no crime in Switzerland.
And so I'm saying, people are going, well, guns are bad and that. Well, I would say, look, we're in a point now. I mean, in Israel, they issued 4 million sidearms to anyone who'd ever been in the service, right?
Yep.
And they're mandatory they carry them. I don't see there's any reason you can say anyone who was ever in the National Guard, anybody who was ever a police officer, anybody who was ever in the Army, Navy, Marines, or Air Force is required to carry a handgun at all times.
Well,
because
that's where this is going right now.
We just do not have enough cops on the street because right now we've got sleeper cells in this country, like what happened in San Bernardino. I don't think that was workplace violence. I think that was something like the Coos Force. That was a sleeper cell. They've been planning this for 5 or 10 years. These guys are professional assassins, and there's probably 30,000 of them in this country easy. And so we don't have the police force on hand. We should bring in our reserves. Everyone who doesn't have a felony and has had training, has been in the armed forces, has been in the police force, National Guard, should be required to carry a gun all the time until this is sorted out.
Well, you know that in a lot of counties, all police are required to carry a gun 24 hours a day when they're out, whether they're on or off duty.
But see, if you're a cop and you're not carrying a gun 24 hours a day, you're taking a risk because obviously you're making enemies out on the street. So, and the enemies aren't going to sleep. After 8 hours, the crooks aren't going, oh, I'm not mad at the cop anymore, right? And so, I mean, and that's the same thing, so it just makes sense to carry a gun all the time. But I'm talking about the retirees should be coming back in. And I also think if you don't have a felony, why not have open carry?
Well, the whole deal is, I don't know if it's just open carry. I'm more leaning toward concealed carry, because that way the criminals they don't have any idea who's got a gun.
Well,
and that puts a whole other onus on them to take a guessing game on that next person they grab, because that grandma may be carrying a Glock, a mini Glock.
Concealed carry is a lot harder to get through politically.
Well, here's the deal. They're talking about concealed carry. In fact, there's talk in Congress right now to almost have a federal law saying you can carry a firearm.
Right.
And
Unless you have a felony.
Unless you have a felony
you're
or
right.
mentally deranged
No,
or
what the
history
fear
or
is,
whatever.
what the administration comes back with this is like, well, if you're on the no-fly list, well, that's pretty arbitrary. Anyone can get on the no-fly list. I think Kennedy was on the. I mean, there's like a lot of famous people
Yes.
who got on it for
By
whatever,
accident.
by whatever reason. And also, if they're saying, well, you're mentally this, mentally that. Well, you know, their argument is anyone who's ever gone to war is crazy.
Oh, that's because they get post-traumatic disorder.
So no veterans can have it. So really, I think the test should be if you don't have a felony, you should be able to.
And you haven't been committed to
Yeah,
some 5150.
Yeah, if you haven't been 5150, you should be able to carry a firearm if you're over 18.
Well, I totally agree with you, Mark.
And that is the complete opposite of how the Democrats and Obama looks at it. Obama doesn't think any civilian should have
a gun ever.
And I think, you know, really.
But wait a minute, doesn't that raise the question of Alinsky, the way they talk about subverting the entire nation by taking away their rights, and then you infiltrate the community and you infiltrate the government, and then you take away their rights?
You look at Mao. Okay, he took away everyone's gun. He had a population of 200 million people. And he took 65 million political prisoners. He broke their kneecaps, starved them to death, and shot them. Well, he won 100% of every vote after that.
I
right?
know he did. I had no doubt.
And you look at Stalin, right? He did 30 million people. He starved them. He shot them. That was basically anybody.
But he took away all their guns.
Well, that's the first thing they did is took away their guns. And then Hitler,
what did Hitler do? Hitler took away all their guns.
And Pol Pot. So
and Pol Pot.
And so
Cambodia.
So you're talking about 105 million people who had their knees broken, were shot by dictators. The first thing they did was take away their guns. And so people go, well, Sandy Hook, 14 people were killed. And then over here, 10 people were killed. Well, wait a minute. When it gets to be around 105 million, well, actually, that was back when, when you were talking, that was back when there's 2 billion people. So when it gets to be about when it gets to be about 500 million people, 500 million, then I think we should worry about it, right? But right now, the despots have killed hundreds of millions of people, and the stray shots of people had maybe killed in the 20s or hundreds.
Right.
So I'd say on balance, the more citizens that have guns, the better.
Well, you know, it's always interesting. They always argue that it's the gun that committed the violence when, in fact, the true violence was committed by the individual. And that's the big flaw in this whole gun argument. Everyone says the gun jumps up and shoots somebody. No, it's not the gun that stood up and shoots somebody. It's somebody stood up and shoots somebody.
I mean, I think we have 100 million firearms in the United States at least.
Well, when you talk about the restrictions, where are all those people getting the guns in Chicago? And on that note, we are going to call it tonight because I want this continued on our next show because we have more statistics coming. And I want to thank everyone tonight for coming and enjoying Law Talk with Mark and I hope to see you next time.
Well,
So anyway.